Hi everyone. It's a big honor to be speaking, and especially first. So let me tell you a bit about me and what I do. So I'm not actually a part of the Swarm team. I'm rather a big supporter and believer in the cause and collaborator when possible. So I will speak about what happens in a Swarm-enabled world. So what happens in the future after Swarm gets built completely, after a rich ecosystem gets built around it, how Swarm will incredibly change the internet as we know it. So a little bit about me. I'm a computer scientist by training. I have a VC fund. I started roughly at the same time as I started working with the Swarm team. Here in the bottom left, you can see us at after the, I think it was after the first Swarm Summit in Berlin in 2016 or 17, and that's me speaking. And I've been kind of a collaborator and a supporter for a long time. I work mostly on the database side and on the coding theory side of Swarm. In my day job, I am an investor, investing in pre-seed startups and seed startups in Europe. Anything that has to do with hardcore computer science, algorithms that change the world, machine learning, blockchain, cryptography, that kind of stuff. If you have anything, if you're working with something interesting, come talk to me. And I'm very, very pleased to be able to kind of give the kind of the VC view of Swarm. So let's talk a little bit about the internet. So the internet is not what it was supposed to be, I'd say. I mean, it was supposed to be better, and we kind of failed. I mean, it's almost my generation, maybe with people a bit older than me, kind of failed to build it in the way that it was supposed to happen. So it was supposed to help us share information in a better way and to collaborate better. But we ended up with this weird siloed vision. And a lot of people talk about Facebook and Twitter, but I want to start with actually the way we work, because we spend like 8 hours plus a day on our jobs. And the way we do our jobs is vastly stunted by the way that software works right now. And I'll explain exactly why it's like that and what's broken, what's inherently broken about it. So my girlfriend uses the Microsoft suite in her job, and she's logged in. If you see the top right of the slides, you use the Microsoft Office and the tasks and the Teams and everything and the Outlook. It's very hard to get out of it because all of these tools interact with each other, and they're all a siloed source of working, right? And all of our collaborators use this, and in their business, they all use this. In my business, we use the GDocs, right? And when I try to collaborate with my lawyers who use Word, then we need to start sending files around and export them and stuff like this. Now, if you look at this, it's not, you'll see this trend appears all over the place. So Slack, for example, you're stuck in the Slack ecosystem. You can't leave if you started using Slack. You need to pay $10 per client per month. And that's where you are, and that's where all your history is. The Google Suite, the same. And if you look at Facebook, this is most apparent. You're stuck with the news feed. You're stuck with the way, with the friend relationships with your social network on Facebook. You can't leave it, right? What you can do is you can migrate, right? If you want a Facebook for intellectuals, you get Twitter. If you want a Facebook for sexy people, you get Instagram. If you want to, you do have your right-wing Facebook, right? And if you want a Facebook for old people, you have Facebook. But inside of each of these ecosystems, you're locked, you can't migrate, and you're stuck even with the most mundane things. Like, why is the newsfeed not changeable? Because Facebook really likes to control what you see, to influence you, and so on. Now, you can say, well, this is what, Evernote and Notion, the same thing, you're stuck in Evernote. Why is this? It's because software locks you in, and that's what a profit model works as, right? I'm a VC, and if I say, if a founder comes and says, I will compete with Notion or with Evernote, I say, where's your $10 million, right? Because you need to serve all these users. You're going to have, you need a marketing team, you need a sales team, you need like to create this fossilized organization, and it's going to be moving very, very slowly because these are really slow-moving big systems. Now, so before I tell you, I claim that Swarm fixes this, and before I tell you how, what is Swarm? So you'll hear a lot, but for the purpose of this discussion, it's, we can say it's decentralized hosting system. We can say it's a BitTorrent with incentives, but for the purpose of this discussion, it's a system that stores and serves data on demand, right? Where any data is accessible from any device. It's a fast, robust, and auto-scaling, right? And the trick for this whole thing is that it's the economic incentives, right? So for the purpose of this discussion, for the rest of this talk, think of Swarm as decentralized AWS, right? It's a system, a cloud type system that serves files very quickly, very robustly because of its smart economic incentives. Now, if you take one thing from this talk, take the following thing. The key insight of why Swarm will fix the world of software as we know it is because it shifts the cost of using or running an application from the host to the user. So under Swarm, the cost of an application is paid by the user of the application and not by the host of this application. This means that it's much cheaper to develop software, and therefore things will move much faster. And the result will be a complete revolution in the way we build software. So it's really important to note this because it's a simple sounding change. Okay, someone else pays, right? But I'm claiming that this simple change will have a very large outcome. And in this talk, I will show you how. One more note about this. Suppose you go back to 1990 and I tell you, there's this new thing, it's called the web. It's going to change the world as we know it. And the way it's going to change the world is there will be social networks, everything will be e-commerce, it will be distributed, it will work on one protocol stack. You say, what are you talking about, right? The world doesn't change by just changing the way you move data around. But in fact, what the internet did is it caused all data to be deemed equal, right? The internet doesn't care if you use the phone, if you use it for a phone call or for watching something or for collaborating on open source or on anything. And the change to the economy makes a very big change in the outcome. And that's what I'm going to claim that Swarm does, okay? So it's really hard to imagine how a future change will look. So let's pretend we go into a time machine and we emerge in the year 2030. And let me show you the lives of two people, Dana, a developer, a typical developer, and Joe, a simple user. So meet Dana, a simple developer. So how is Dana's life different from what it is today, from developers today? So today, developers work in software companies. They develop features, they have a marketing department, they have a sales department. Or some developers work on open source or something like this and make, and it's not a standard way to do things, and it serves only a very small subset of typical users. How does Dana work? She builds software herself, not as part of the company. She makes her salary through revenue sharing. So she builds applications that run on top of Swarm, and she makes her salary because the users pay network fees to get the service. These are like, 5 cents a month, right? These are very small network fees. If Dana had to pay those network fees for hundreds of millions of users, this would be very expensive. She'd need an economical back behind her. But because the users pay those very small fees, she can just get a revenue share of these fees. Dana creates features because she doesn't have crazy marketing departments and a fossilized system around her. She can do super fast iterations, and she can work on an open ecosystem for collaboration, just like in open source software. And finally, her software interfaces with standard data formats. It's like any browser reads HTML, right? So any browser is able to read the standard format that we designed in the beginning of the internet and to parse it on the screen, right? It's the same thing with Dana. The software she builds interfaces with very standard types. And therefore, she's working on a standardized data system that is open, and she iterates on features, right? So that's the view from Dana's side. Dana will probably be much happier than developers today, but her software will be developing much quicker and answering many needs of users, of particular user groups. Now, let's look at Joe, who is an end user. So Joe's entire digital life happens on top of the Swarm stack. So, he works on top of it. He does all of his socializing on top of it, gaming, voting, taxes. But it's much more than just taking what we have today, the digital life or the stuff we do today, and digitalizing them. Because think of kind of predicting Facebook in the year 1995. It was very hard to predict this very complex texture of a social network. This is what it will look like. It will be like WeChat, like the big WeChat ecosystem, but much more powerful because it moves much faster. This will be a modular experience, just like choosing plugins for a browser. And these will be very smart apps that evolve very rapidly. So because the point is, because of the small change to the economic model of developing software, because Dana doesn't have to pay for the software, you'll get very, very large outcomes of how the software ecosystem evolves. Now, So I'm claiming that Swarm will rewrite the last 20 years of the cloud because of this particular insight, that the fees are going to be paid by the user and not by the developer. And therefore, the developer will incur very low cost. So you'll get the Web 2 capabilities, but with the freedom that comes from Web 1. And that's going to be the power of Swarm. And let me tell you how this changes the world. This is the last slide. How this changes the world in a very dramatic way. So the most powerful thing we do today is social collaboration. I gave a talk about this. Let me plug it in there. You just Google the title on the bottom right. So let me just shortly say, the most powerful force we have is to collaborate together and to build stuff together. But right now, we don't have digital infrastructure to do this because the current ways to collaborate are fossilized and change-averse because of their economic model that requires a lot of money upfront to change. Now, the Swarm ecosystem, because of it shifts the economic burden, it empowers possibly hundreds of thousands of developers to create a rich ecosystem to enable us to break these data silos and collaborate, make new collaborative software that is modular, that is powerful, standardized, interoperable. And this will change the world in a very deep way that is very hard to predict, but is kind of easy to get a sort of grasp on. Thank you very much.